Mike, welcome to the podcast.
All right, Rich, how you doing?
I'm great. It's good to see you, man. I've known you a long time, but I haven't had any long conversations with you in a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while.
To have moved here and bought what you've bought and done what you've done and never really trying to get involved in so much, you're involved in so much. Like, let's talk about your journey to Nosara, how you found it, and how you got started, just to give a little bit of background.
Yeah.
And then we'll venture wherever the conversation takes us. But just tell us how you found this place, a little bit of background on you, and just give us like the quick synopsis and entry.
Okay. Yeah, I think my journey with Costa Rica started in 2008. I took a trip with some girls down here. They needed a male to kind of help be that male energy in another country. So I said, sure, I'll come down and hang out. Sounds like a fun trip. And we flew into San Jose, not really knowing that the Liberia airport was there. At the time, it was so small, right? And
This
so
is 2008, is that what you said?
in 2008, yeah.
It still had the big fan.
Still had the big fans, that's right. Yeah. The big ass fans, which they still have, actually. They just kind of remodeled around it. At the time, you know, I'd never been here. Being from Colorado, I had a lot of friends who had visited and been surfing and, you know, had put the word out there. And so it was very attractive concept for me to come down here. I'd been wanting to come down for a few years. Anyway, we drove all the way from San Jose to the northern tip to the Bahia where the national park is during the middle of the night. And I don't know, like 15 years ago, the roads weren't marked very well. Phones didn't work very well, but we made it. And the first night we ended up in Rincon de la Vieja. Then, you know, hung out, met some locals. They quit their jobs, took us camping up in the national park, and then we ended around Tamarindo. So my first experience in Costa Rica was coming to Guanacaste. And I had some friends from Boulder who had set up camp here. Marcus, who built Los Sueños, was a friend from Boulder. And Stevie Vonderhaar was a friend who had built a house down here.
That's interesting. So you already had connections kind of to the north of Nosara because you've always landed there. Now you're developing your neighborhood, all the projects you're in. You're like, you're deep, your personal house, all that stuff.
Yeah.
You were supposed to be up there, I guess.
Yeah, for me at the time when I came down here, you know, I was at the beginning of a decent career. I was really busy, but I was actually so busy. The point for me was not so much to be in the towns. The point for me was to come find my peace, you know, my space from the world where I could show up and disappear for a few days and not have people bothering me. My friends, you know, when you're moving, the first time you're going to do something in a different country, you have a lot of apprehension. How am I going to do this? I don't know people. Or am I going to get robbed? How am I going to be able to do business there? Is it safe? All those questions come up in your head. And Stevie happened to be, you know, my jump off point because I knew I had a very close friend from Boulder that was living here full time. So for me, San Juanillo started from him living at the bottom of the hill. My two other partners from Boulder and from New York at the time were also friends with Stevie. One of them called me. I was brewing beer and I had a fix and flip business in Boulder on the side so I could make extra money. And my other partner in the fix and flip business said, dude, we got to go down and see Stevie, you know, like, let's go buy property in Costa Rica. It's great surfing. And I was like, dude, I was just down there on this trip, you know, go check him out. Go say hey to Stevie and go look at property. Well, he found a piece of property, sent me pictures. I was like, buy it, you know. It was pretty cheap back in the day, especially up in San Juanillo. And so that was the beginning of my journey. And we built a house there so that he could help us manage it.
I got you. Okay, so fast forward us into when I first met you, you were looking for, I guess, the next piece, which ultimately ended up becoming NIMBU. So I guess, actually give us a quick, for anybody who's listening to this who doesn't know you, Give us a quick overview of NIMBU and just explain it, because people now hear about it. It's already established. People drive by Ostina and see stuff happening, but they might not know the background where you were coming from, because I met you at the beginning. It's different. Really didn't make sense in a way. From an economical standpoint.
From the Nosara standpoint, yeah.
Right. And well, for me, any of the sales that I make, I'm generally, so many people come down, they make a purchase on an emotional high, and then they finds out their problems still follow them, or Nosara didn't solve it all.
Right.
Something happens, or just whatever. I got to get them back out.
Yeah.
So I've kind of made my career off of getting people back out, or helping people focus on buying the least risky thing that they possibly could do. And that's strategic. I've been doing that for a long time. And during the COVID years, I felt like I lost my angle here, because things just flew up. Everything was just flying. And it's like, wait a second, my style isn't really applicable anymore. Nosara just blew up. So that's kind of when I was like, I guess I'm done.
Yeah.
Now that the market's cooled down, I'm relevant again. Now that my knowledge means something. Yeah. But I'm saying all that to say this. From day one, you've went completely against the grain. You've paid a lot more money than you needed to for some things. You've done infrastructure and things off a personal heart and mind connection that make no economic sense. But you always do it. You always pull it off. I didn't know if you gained so much confidence from your brewery that you just had to do it, or if you just had so much money that you didn't care. But over the years, this is kind of what I think behind your back. It's like, I like what he's doing. I respect it. I think it's cool, but gosh, that's going to be hard. So I said all that to set up NIMBU. Go ahead and introduce that to the populace while you have this platform.
Yeah, it's interesting that, the segue into buying the property at NIMBU is actually how I met you and everyone else at Surfing Nosara back around 2010 when I was finished with my home. I've become friends with Andrew Saxton, and he, I approached him. I said, I need to find another piece of property, because I got into this not having the time or the money. It was just kind of a fun, adventurous thing. Let's do it, with my friends. But I realized once I started getting into it, that at some point I might want to have my own space for my family. I might not want to share it. I might not want the rental property. I might want to live here or retire here. So I approached Andrew, and he took advantage of those properties up north, knowing that I already was ingrained a little bit in the community there. I'd embedded myself with the locals, got to know the local community pretty well over the first couple of years. Again,
these are the opposites of what we see every day and deal with. It's normally close to Beach Quiones or really big view. That's kind of it.
Exactly.
Especially at that time, and the entire time you were anchored that way.
Right.
And Andrew was also in love with that area up there and was looking to do stuff. So he was trying to figure out.
Exactly, yeah. So Perla was kind of the only thing happening with a friend we all know, Peter Gilman, at the time. And so he brought me up to see some properties with Peter Gilman, thinking, hey, this is between him and Nosara, gets him a little closer. My points back then were I want a private spot that's ocean view. And at the time, I wasn't really happy with the properties I was seeing. And he brought me to this piece of land that his roommate at the time, his father had owned and wasn't actively for sale, but he figured he'd just shoot the moon and show it to me. And being in the industry that I was, it takes a special kind of person. You have to be able to see things into the future a little bit, what the potential of those things are. Being a brewer and building out this big company, I was always envisioning, okay, what's the next step? What's the next sustainable piece? How can I add value, right, to this piece of what I'm doing? And so I saw the land. It was more than I could afford. He called me back. I gave him kind of my vision of what I wanted to do at the time. And I think that stuck with Andrew. So he called me back a couple months later after Christmas. And he said, hey, man, I really like what you're doing. Or what your vision was of that property, but there's some other people interested. I'm just calling back to see if you're still interested in it, or if you ever found friends that wanted to invest. And I said, I've been busy, but I really can't afford it. So he goes, just send me a number. Sent me a number. I said, what the heck, let's put in an offer. And I put in an offer, and to my surprise, the owners were receptive and counter offered. We went back and forth for a while, but it was a process getting the property. It took about 8 months to get the title work figured out, and it was swimming upstream. But I did see it was on the turtle refuge. I wanted to be in nature. I wasn't all about being in town. I wanted to be outside the space so that I could wake up, have my coffee in the morning, look at the surf break, and figure out what my day was going to be like every day.
I remember you thinking all the way through to choosing your neighbors.
Yeah.
And you were like, hey, I'm going to launch this thing. It's going to cost more than everything else. I'm going to pay for all of this stuff when it comes to water and infrastructure. Yeah. We can fast forward through this because we have other subjects to get to too.
Yeah.
But you truly took it on when no one else would. And it, again, I was just like, this is a lot of work. This is a lot of risk. You became ever more committed to it and created what's now known as NIMBU. So go ahead and explain the product so people understand.
Right. So kind of fast forward through all the minutia of being able to get into the property. A lot of people come here looking for the most secure situation. For me, before I even took the step, I built that other house with other people to limit my liability and my input, how much time I needed to put into that. When I realized I wanted to put a little bit more time into it, for me, it's about learning the lessons a lot of times. Anytime anybody goes into things, be it personal or business or anything else, when you start something that you're going to have to learn a lot of lessons to get yourself to the level of being at the top, right?
Okay.
So for me, it was a stepping stone. I wanted to start small and then grow into something bigger after understanding the hurdles. And I tell you what, jumping into that property really was an eye-opener and taught me how to navigate a lot of the hurdles, both politically, with the cantons and permitting and working with the right people that are going to help you navigate and not take advantage of you. And I learned a lot of lessons through that. So the place where I was coming from was I wasn't a developer. I was a brewer. And, I was into real estate, but just a different kind. I wasn't used to developing neighborhoods. So where I was coming from was a little different. I didn't come down here to buy land, develop it, make a bunch of money. What I came to do was, my concept was, how can I build a community of people that are in another country where they're feeling insecure about their investment and put in the infrastructure that is going to attract the right kind of people that are also focused on sustainability, because my brewery was very sustainable and that was very important to me. But to build a neighborhood where the neighbors all were there to help take care of each other when they weren't there. Somebody's going to watch my house, or you need your eggs, or, so that we could not be a commune, but have all the infrastructure, more than what people were used to here, water, fiber optic, all those things, but in nature, so that we're used to what we're used to at our, where we come from, the level of construction and things there, of infrastructure there, but do it at a natural setting. So that was my goal. Build the solar farm, build backup generators, put in your own well system, contribute to the local ASADA so that we have regular ASADA water, not try to hide from it to get a water letter, right? So my goal was coming from the opposite direction, and in doing so I required, which was another funny concept that people were wondering, well, what is he thinking? Coming from a very sustainable background, my goal was, anyone who wants to live in this has to buy into my concept. It's super high end. I'm not in it for the money. I'm in it for the lifestyle. In order to do that, you have to, 10% of what you purchase goes in an escrow account, and you have to sit on that until your build project, and I will give you that 10% of what you bought into to put back into your build project for sustainability on your builds. So all the homes in NIMBU, I think it was the first time anybody thought of doing something a little outside the box. It throws a lot of minutia into the deal, but for me, I didn't want to control people after I knew that I had buy-in from the right type of people that wanted to live there.
I see. So is it working to where people, actually, let's just leave it that the question of that is it working? Like, how's it going?
Good question. I did have to turn away several people who didn't fit the mold. They came from the cities and they had these ideals, and they were very, the great thing about doing land and business here in real estate is it doesn't have all the regulation that we have back home. If I want to pick my neighbor, I had the advantage of picking my neighbor. If I don't want you here, get out. You can't necessarily do that back home. But I knew that one bad apple was going to ruin the whole concept for me. So it was more about picking the right neighbors. And the 10% was kind of the barrier to say this is the right kind of person or not. After that, I just want people to be able to have their build, live their lives, not be controlled, but build their dreams, right? So, once we got through that barrier, the people that ended up in the community, I think, are helping influence other people in the community. They're contributing to Oceanal, which is really needed. Some people to be involved with the community there, to help the schools, to help raise awareness. I think we have the Oceanal Feria today for the first day from 2 to 5 that, Jeannie, my neighbor, has initiated with people. We've helped build the bridges for the community. So I'm really proud of the neighbors that we have so far. It's a great community. I feel lucky to have them.
All right, and give us a quick 30-second commercial on NIMBU, what it is, and we'll bounce on to our next subject.
It's just a boutique. It's a small boutique community. It's only 11 home sites. We have 5 homes built, a 6th at the entrance that is almost finished. Most of the owners in there, instead of buying a lot, they bought 2. So all the lots are sold except for 1, and I'm kind of holding on to that lot for the right person.
Gotcha. So it's not an active development that you're out promoting or pushing for. It was actually.
I'm not trying to sell anything. Yeah, it's done. It's done. It's there. We have great people. I feel very lucky that I was able to navigate some of the water issues. I was the first person to bring an engineer in that dealt when the Sodas changed the water for water letters, and the government used that turning point to be able to control permitting for builds and things like that. So I got very lucky with my timing that I navigated that well with the local Asada and donating and trying to help build the community, as opposed to getting stuck in the minutia that everybody else got into after. I was the first one. So the timing helped me a lot.
So let's use that as a bit of a segue. You've gotten into so much other stuff. Without going into too much detail, we got to keep you alive after this podcast. Hit us. Yeah. Give a quick explanation of like the bridges. Like, for example, people don't know. They hear rumors of it. People hear talk of things. But behind the scenes, the way things work here is very, let's just say, cumbersome.
I think that when people come here, they come for what they see that Costa Rica represents. It's this wild place. It's natural nature. It's sustainable. The energy of the country, it's like the most sustainable energy source. It's all water power, wind power, solar power, or geothermal here. It's like 96 or 98% of the electricity produced. It's the highest in the world. They won a big award in Europe a few years ago for their sustainability. So that image has drawn people here. It's the natural resources. It's the surf. It's the mountains, the volcanoes, the animals. Okay, but then when you get here, the minutia, anytime you get involved with a process for growth or expansion, you're going to run into a lot of roadblocks. And so for those of us who have been here long enough, yourself included, have seen the growth and expansion happen, I guess we understand more about how we got to get it done quickly because everything changes so fast.
Let's start with the bridge, because you're in the outer area. That's been your focus from day one, is outer areas. And what I guess part of where I'm coming from is, it's part of Nosara, but it's also something different. And there's a gap, literally, just via transportation, and the bridge
Yeah.
When I first got here, it was always a rumor. It was kind of Garza and Nosara were competing to see which place was going to catch.
Right. Yeah, I hear
Now,
you.
as we sit here in 2024 recording this, the road's paved from Garza.
With the 3 bridges, the Bomba and the 2 down south.
Exactly.
So,
But
no,
along the way, you
yeah.
guys had some adventures. Can you fly through
Yeah,
the bridge
yeah,
story,
yeah.
please?
So we're actually still dealing with the bridge story. When I bought the land to go way back again, I didn't buy it thinking I was going to develop it anytime soon, because we didn't have access to Nosara. We didn't have access to the airport. Rio Montaña was the big river that they literally had a little boat during the storms for people that needed to work in Nosara that would take people across the river. They'd have to leave their motorcycle or have a family member drive them down to the river and cart them to the other side, right? We didn't even have tuk-tuks back in the day. It was like you had to know somebody that was going to help shuttle you back to work, back and forth. So I didn't really have the inclination to do anything with the land. I was happy being up north in my house in San Juanillo, but like so many other random things that happen in Costa Rica, suddenly the bridge was built over Rio Montaña. At that point, I knew I needed to develop, but we still had 2 other rivers to cross up there. The community, after helping the Asadas and the community build a water system that was more reliable, they came to me asking me for help with the bridges. For 9 years at that time, they had been trying to get bridges just to be able to access Nosara for safety reasons more than anything else. They had no access to medical attention or anything. Anything happened, they were flooded in over here on this little island, and they needed that access. So they were pleading, how can we get this done? And I said, well, draw some plans and submit them, and maybe we can raise money together through the local community and through people moving in. They came back to me with a drawing on a napkin, and I said, no, we will never get away with it. We need an architect or an engineer to submit the right drawings. They came back a month or 2 later, gave me a drawing from an engineer at MOPT, and I said, now we're talking. And I helped raise money. The community helped raise money. The Ferreteria donated their trucks, and we built a little bridge over Rio Seco north of Rio Montaña. The community built it. So, but we then had a lot of adversity coming at us through MOPT and the government, where they wanted to tear the bridge down. They were coming after people trying to find who the point person was, so they could figure out a denuncia. Luckily, being a visitante at the time, they couldn't find me really, but they did an interview on it, and we challenged MOP. We said, look, these are your engineers that drew this. People have not had access to medical care during the, people are flipping cars. There's been deaths, and there's been pleas from the community for 9 years. We have, emails and mail and things with the municipality showing the history. We need help, and if you send us your engineers, the community will build another bridge over the next one. And so we're still going through that with Ostinol, the local community, another neighbor from NIMBU, Jeannie and Michael. Jeannie spearheaded with San Juanillo and Marbella, the local audio, to raise money. And when MOP said that they'd appropriate a bridge instead of having it taken for another project, she worked with the communities, raised the money, and we literally got 2 trucks to privately bring the bridge down. It's sitting in Ostinol waiting to be installed. So,
man,
yeah.
Shout out to all of you guys for trying to help that community. It would be great if the residents had access to medical care and supplies and just a higher quality of life and getting to their jobs.
Too,
Well, I mean, so many people need to come in here to work, and you want the local communities to thrive.
And right now, when you think about the housing bubble, I think one of the big conversations that I've been a part of with the local community is, how can we afford to live? And the base pay. It's more expensive to live here than Escazú, and there's a lot happening around that right now. So where do you think these people are finding affordable living, it's up to the north, it's down to the south, it's in the mountains. They're having to travel to work to get here. And so me personally, I love Nosara, and I'm really happy for the community here. It's really been, I know we have a lot of growing pains. But it's been very successful so far because we have a lot of very amazing, conscious people who want to do it the right way, unlike Tamarindo and Jaco and some other examples that we've had along the coastline. But for me, it's a double-edged sword because I'm worried as things grow out how our little community is going to be affected by it.
Environment's extremely important, but the reality is Nosara has more focus on the environment than just about anywhere.
Yeah.
What we've very much been lacking from the day I got here, and it's getting better today, but we're very much lacking attention on the local people.
Right.
As in, how are they going to make it? Mike, I can barely make it here.
Yeah.
I work my butt off. I have for a long time, but no,
Yeah.
even if I make more money, Nosara goes more.
Mm-hmm.
So how in the world, and I have a degree, I have, let me think, 15 years of experience in the States before I got here. Like,
Yeah.
I have all these tools and resources, and it's still hard. So how are people going to get positioned if we don't get to them? So that, I guess I share that in common with you. I was just on the beach with a dear friend he was saying, I was doing a surf report, and he was upset. He's like, anyone who promotes anything about bringing people to this area at this point, it's a sin. This is wrong. You have to stop. And I looked at him and I was like, this isn't a secret.
Yeah.
That day left a long time ago, like a long time ago.
Yeah.
Now it's, we need to do the absolute best we can, the absolute best that we can with what we have. But don't think you're gonna, being quiet about Nosara is gonna stop anything. What's done is done. Now what we have to figure out is how do we get the people from here to actually have a chance here.
Yeah.
I really believe that. So I'm trying to flip the page off the old narrative of don't tell anyone about Nosara. That part's done. Also, frequently the comment is made, all the developers are just here for our money and off to the next. All here for the money, off the next. And then I just sat down and talked with you, who wasn't even planning on being a developer. You're coming from a wildly successful brewery that's actually an example for so many other places. We haven't even said the name or anything. I'm trying to give you an existence outside of that. But you jumped into development, were not in it to make money, built it in a manner that made it not extremely profitable because you paid so much to try to do the environmentally, the sustainability in every angle. People don't know that. They just see you as a rich developer who's coming down here to rape and pillage.
Right.
And I'd like every now and then to have a conversation like this so people can actually see the truth. There are people coming here, as you just said, who actually give a damn, and a big one.
Yeah.
So I like having you on
lucky
camera.
To have that.
We're wildly lucky to have
We're
that.
incredibly lucky. I mean, if you go, I shouldn't point out other names of other towns, but and I already
You
did
just
a little
did,
bit.
by the way.
I know.
And also that you weren't reaching very far to name Jaco and Tamarind.
Yeah.
That wasn't a stretch.
Well, they were the shining light in the beginning. Like, oh, Costa Rica is finally going to be on the map, and we have these great towns, and all the locals were so excited for it. But now the locals don't want to be there because of what's been created, and there's such a disparity between what's being built and what the local community can exist on without things like minimum wage and but the problem is, as you got to on a personal level there a minute ago, is that the cost of living here, it's not just real estate. The cost of living is based off of it used to be that labor was cheap, and that's the only thing that was cheap because everything else had import taxes and shipping and everything that we have to pay. So you're paying on top of the prices that we're used to paying wherever you come from. Right? Because most other places where the people that are moving here from Canada, the United States, Europe, they're already developed first world countries, and there's local products being made there, so you get the prices down. Here, the only local products are fish and rice and beans, okay? So if you ate those things, it was affordable. You have a casado plate at the local soda restaurant, and you get your free drink and your choice of meat, right? Now we have all imported gringo foods, Angus beef burgers, and so the price of living, the cost of living here to have the amenities and the things, the way people want to live, it's actually more expensive here than it is back home. Yet you have people working for $2 an hour. It can't continue to exist this way. However, and a 13% VAT tax that really Europe has a 6 to 7% VAT tax. The country here, it's broken because of the entitlements. We can get into all that stuff later, but there's so many different pieces that are making it more challenging, not just for the locals, but for the expats that came here to surf and live their lives and raise families in another culture where their kids could have 2 languages. Now I'm feeling as a developer like I can't afford to live here, man. But how do you think the local community feels? But luckily we have a lot of very conscious people working on things like that, raising awareness and trying to come up with employee housing projects and things to try to help bridge the gap.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. We are lucky to have that. So instead of staying on the negative side, it's very easy to stay negative.
Yeah,
it's very easy.
Let's talk about the positive.
Yeah, exactly. Or how do we transition into it? So my message to my friend on the beach who was busting my balls, and rightfully so, I'll take it. I admit it. I'm in a machine. I'm not hiding that. What I'm saying is the machines are already orchestrating. Let's do the best we can with what we can.
Sure.
And getting to your point, I think the people coming in are the solution. Costa Rica's not going to strike oil and all of a sudden things are going to work out. We're probably not going to fix all of our fishing and other issues instantly.
Yeah.
That stuff. I mean, there's so many chapters to
generations.
The reality though is people who are coming in right now, if we can catch them right when they come in, instead of, oh, you're building a big house, let me be grumpy, and then at some point in time I accept it, then we're friends, then I'm hanging out at your house. Like that's kind of how it normally goes. People bitch about it, we complain, we get all piratey, and then after they're there, we accept it, we become friends, and then they become your clients at your other business. So what my gentle suggestion and my gospel through this podcast I'm trying to preach is, you're not changing what's happened. What's happened has happened. It's out of your control. It's out of mine. However, we can, the moment someone comes in, just so you know, our firefighters, we pay for that. Everything that we're doing. Barry, you only saw the trees that brought it back that you're enjoying, paid for that. The knowledge of this and people getting involved is what's making it happen. So there's good
deforestation projects,
all of it.
Doing studies on the river and the quality of water going out. I mean, how many communities do you see that are actually focusing on the quality of their surroundings? I will warn us though, and this is kind of scary to me, is that we come in with a point of view, and after being here as long as you've been here, and I've probably been here half that amount of time, around 15, 16 years, you see the evolution of people and their ideas, where they come from. A lot of us, when we come here, we have a certain experience, and we think that experience is going to make this one better, that we know more, and we're going to impose our knowledge on this place. I really warn people, because this is not that place, and it has its own local community that is, luckily, Nosara is trying to pay attention to it, but it's still ignoring it at the same time. It's still imposing things that we think are right that aren't from here. So open your ears, open your minds, include the communities and listen to their needs, and let's work on those projects.
Fantastic point. We have 50-something NGOs right now as we record this, all competing for money from the same place. And I remember, I tell the story sometimes. I don't like it, but it's worth retelling. We have a lot of competing NGOs. That's not for the greater good. A lot of that is because they want it to be with their affiliation or their idea or where they're from or what they're comfortable with. Basically, exactly what you just said. So every year people come down and get fired up and say, all right, we're going to do this. I'm from wherever I'm from, and here's how we did it. And it's going to work. Because I'm just me. Same thing with restaurants. We have people who are chefs and wherever they're from, and they come in town. They're like, I'll do it. It works where I'm from. I'm the best. Well, there's a lot of people competing for the money and the whole thing, right? So on the NGO front, in recent years, we've been siphoning away from some of our most important ones that we can't lose that save lives
Yeah.
based off a good idea and concept, and it's well intended, but people are forgetting, well, again, the local populace, and then they're forgetting to look back at what maybe has been tried or maybe what didn't work. And then here's the real tough part of what I'm trying to say is most of these don't make it because they find out how hard it is. This is a place where things don't make sense.
Yeah.
And then after the things that they did back home don't work here, it gets taxing. Yeah. So a lot of those fade away.
Yeah, and you see the evolution as you're here. You watch the next generation of people go through that same evolution, and as they learn, they're like, you come back to them 3 years later, and they're like, oh yeah, now I know what you were talking about back then, you know. So I just warn the community as we grow, you know, all these ideas are great, and we need change because we need to embrace change instead of fighting the change, because change is here, like you said, no matter what. It's how we change.
Man, you're starting to break rule number 1 of making sense again. So, hey, so what do you suggest? Take a couple topics. So you just won a fishing tournament.
Oh yeah!
Congratulations.
Well, okay. So fishing has just been, you know, a lot of people they come down here for the surfing. For me, one of my loves, I grew up, my dad took me fishing on ponds and lakes, and he had a 32-foot Bertram in Charleston Harbor and took me out saltwater fishing as a young boy, and I got hooked at a young age. So fishing has been important. You know, one of the big fun things for me was learning how to spearfish down here when I moved down. So yeah, that's been one of my moments to get away. That's my vacation. That's my yoga sometimes. That's my
that's your meditation.
Exactly. When I'm in that moment and I'm out on the water, things are real. You know, every decision you make is a real decision. You make the wrong decision and you could be stranded out there, you know?
Hey, all the same as I'm going to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I know you well enough to know that if you're interested in fishing, then you're now deeper way down the road. Maybe not intending to be, but you are. Why don't you go ahead and just fill us in on whatever the heck angle it is, and I'll just buckle up for what it might be. But I know you. Like,
there's two things that are at the top of my mind is, you know, we talk about conservation and sustainability and all those things, but most people are thinking about that from the perspective of the land, where they live, where we're developing and all that stuff.
Land or turtles?
Well, I'm just saying when most people are communicating, we're talking about Nosara, the hills, like where we're living and expanding. A big piece of why we're here is this coastline. And so I think conservation, it's really important not to just be focusing on the monkeys and you know, the space here. We also have a really incredibly valuable resource here on our coastlines. And it's a resource for the local communities for food. It is a resource for, you know, they built a refuge around it with the Silvestre de Ocinal Refuge where I live, to protect the turtles. And so, you know, I think we need, I know the turtles have been a big subject of conversation and development and lighting, and, you know, we needed to protect that resource. But I think there's other parts about that refuge that people aren't thinking about. And I would like to make them aware as somebody who appreciates the water and the ocean resource as well in front of us.
All right, so what do you mean by that?
NIMBU means water, by the way,
okay.
in the old Chorotega language. That's where I came up with that name. Because NIMBU, water is the key to life. We can't live without it, right? When you think about all the necessities that you have a lot of wants, but NIMBU is the necessity, right? And so all the things coming from that ocean and that water, that's why most of us are here. People don't realize that area is not just for the turtles. The refuge actually goes out 3 miles. And people don't want lighting onto the beaches. I live in an area where if my development infringes on the migration of turtles coming in, then I just ruined a natural resource. So my biggest fear as a developer up there is that I'm going to have all these people with bright lights that are going to simulate the moon. And you know, when I look up there from Ocinal down to the Nosara Hills, I see a lot of the lighting and everything. I'm worried if that happens where I live, we're no longer going to have turtles. That's not going to be a national incident. That's going to be an international news incident, right? And it doesn't just go out to the beach. That's where you have people walking and looking and saying, oh, the lighting's okay for the turtles. Those turtles are breeding 3 miles out into the ocean. And so that refuge goes out for 3 miles from Nosara all the way up to Marbella almost, right? Parts of it. I think it ends at Northwest Yanal for the turtle area. But that area is not just for the turtles. The area is a breeding ground, especially the Boca Nosara. It's a breeding ground for the robalo. It's a breeding ground for a lot of not just turtles, but fish. You see the sardines. I mean, where on the coastline can you be 100 yards off the coast and have dolphins? Ostianal, right? I was just out there on a boat with some people, and the amount of wildlife we saw in that refuge is amazing. And we have a lot of people fishing and even in the river netting and fishing and things like that. This is the breeding ground for all of the fish, for all of the bays from Camaranal up to, Tamarindo. So we need to be respectful and try to preserve this area in the ocean, not just on the beaches and with our buildings and our
That's
life.
an interesting point, because we do have the focus on the monkeys and the turtles. It's very easy to catch attention there. I've never thought of that or heard about what you're saying as far as the Boca Nosara, because I just think of the fishermen going out there every morning that we walk around.
The fish come into that area because of the water, and they lay their eggs. It's like that's why it's a refuge. It's not just for the turtles; it's for the fish too. And so it's a breeding ground for the fish, and those fish then go out to populate those other areas. So we need to treat it like a sacred space to preserve that breeding ground, so that future generations will have access to the wonderful nature and ecology that we have on this coastline. Let's take this one spot and say, hey, we need to really be cognizant and take care of this one area. We can fish every other area, but let's protect this area,
Geez, maybe we'll dive more. And you're opening up some doors here I didn't know about. Maybe we'll dive into that more later.
I mean, Guiones, Garza, all that's open, but just right in the Ostianal area, there's that 3 mile window where we need to protect the nature there.
I'm scared of like the local fishermen who just go out there to get food or
I'm not trying to crap on any local fishermen, and they're out there to get food. A lot of them are my friends, I'm not out there pointing the finger and yelling at people. I want to just convey the message and tell people we have to love our surroundings, or else they're not going to be there for us.
Well, man, you're getting my brain thinking. It seems like around the country on so many issues, and the deeper you get into it, you find out the red tape or the powers that be or some other thing that's going on. It's very hard.
Yeah.
It's very hard to figure out where you can just point logically and it clicks and all of a sudden it all gets enacted.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, it's
well, a segue to that and a bigger picture thing is what's happening with FECOP doing studies on the fish populations here. I really commend all the work they've done. They've worked with all the marinas all the way down from Osa up to Papagayo. They're educating the local fishermen and captains about preservation of the pez vela, which is the sailfish. There's a really important bill right now that was proposed by Governor Eli, or Senator Eli, sorry, up in the city, to nationalize the sailfish as like we have the frog for the volcanoes in the mountain jungle regions. They want to make the sailfish the national symbol for Costa Rica to protect it and to protect the sport fishing industry. But people think it's the opposite. They're trying to protect it to make it illegal. That's not what's happening.
I was just about to say that. I wonder if it was going to inflame to where the two sides ignite and it becomes polarizing.
And I think FECOP is doing a great job trying to educate the captains because there's a lot of confusion there, and I understand why.
Yeah, they're scared of them.
The average tourist coming in to fish for their 1 to 2 week vacation brings in 3 to 4 times the amount of income into the country. Its average is like $32,000 to $36,000 a week they're spending on their vacation. That's a huge amount of revenue for the country, and we need to preserve those experiences and those kind of tourists. We need to preserve that industry for the locals, for the amount of fish populations for the community along the coastline that we all rely on. These are really important things for this country. We have a lot of really special resources, and I think the coastlines need more attention as far as making sure that the conservation is, people are aware of what we need to conserve those areas.
Jeez, man, we're covering all types of interesting topics. You're in the music business too, man. What's going on there? What's happening? What are you up to?
In life, sometimes you come to the realization that you should say no more in your life. I probably got too many projects going on. When I moved down here, I had retired from my brewing industry job, and I kept thinking, well, what am I going to do next? What's my fun time going to be? What's my fun business? And
arguing with municipalities about roads and doing developments that don't make any money because you wanted to shavers, winning fishing tournaments, then working on saving breeding grounds in a. I can keep going, but
I guess I don't get out much these days. I'm too busy on my little projects. But one of those projects has been, Colorado with Red Rocks Amphitheater. I come from a really rich history of incredible music and sports and entertainment, and wanting to be a part of those things. Colorado has a very similar energy to Costa Rica, but when I came down here after going to concerts every weekend for 6 months out of the year, it's part of my ethos. It's part of like me getting out, like doing my fishing down here, my lifestyle.
So that's your release as well as fun. It's your whole.
Yes.
So just part of who you are.
Well, yeah, and when I was down here, a friend introduced me to a little investment group, and they were going to do a big concert at the National Stadium, and one thing led to another, and the whole concept fell apart. And I approached the promoter at the time, and I said, "Man, you really don't know what you're doing, do you?" And I said, I come from an area where I've been friends with a lot of the local producers and things like that. Maybe I can help try to bridge a gap. About a month later, he drove 5 hours from San Jose all the way down to my house, San Juanillo, in the middle of nowhere. And he said, I need your help. And so I built a company called Costa Vida Presents. And we now put on large-scale events for the National Stadium, Saprissa, Parque Aviva, and Pedregal. Music
you can't
events.
Help it, man. You just can't help it.
As a matter of fact, one is happening tonight, Don Omar with Evie Queen up at the National Stadium. I'm not there. Tomorrow night.
Is it fun or is it stressful? Which is it more of?
It's a combination of both. It's a lot of work, a lot of organization. I could use a lot more investment money to really do it the way it needs to be done. So if anybody wants to invest in, Pearl Jam, or we got a lot of people wanting to come down here. We just turned down Snoop Dogg on a deal for Semana Santa because he wanted too much money. But there's a lot of opportunity there. We just finished Nitro Circus January 27th, first time to the National Stadium. I think we showed them, it was first time to Latin America, as a matter of fact. Travis Pastrana came out of retirement after 20, he'd been doing it 20 years. He'd been out of it for 5 or 6 years. We had a base jumper jump off the Hilton Hotel into the stadium. And it was the largest spectacle event, I think, in the history of Costa Rica. It was really fun. So when you get to the final and to the end point, you're glowing and you did it and you pulled it off. It's really an amazing moment. The 8 months to get to that point, and the stress, and the amount of work that goes into it, when you have 400 to 1,000 employees over a week period, and trying to manage the money and protect your investors and things, it's pretty stressful.
Mike, I've pulled out my hair a couple times just doing G-Love shows for benefits around here, raising money for security or something.
I did a beer with G-Love back in the day called Peach Porch Lounger.
Oh, geez, I forgot about all that. Hey, we're trying to get him. It looks like he's coming down for November.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I one day maybe you could connect. It'd be awesome if we could get him and Jack and Donovan or something. But
yeah, it'd be great. Yeah, and you know, I'm working with the Roca Mystica up here. I'm trying to start building some more local stuff. We're talking to Damian Marley, Stick Figure right now. Pepper, the manager, said just give me a date. So I'm thinking about trying to do some smaller stuff and do a lot more coastal stuff. We just need the right locations and the right genre, I think.
Maybe we'll talk more about that. Maybe that'd be a way to.
Sure.
Now that my kids are older, Kaya's 20, Elisha's 16. I finally started playing music again. And before I came down here, I actually played an upright bass in a bluegrass band.
Yeah.
And I had taken a liking to it. Now that the kids are older, I started playing again. And it's just a way to reconnect and see all my friends and clients, because I'm normally so busy or wildly involved in the community thing. I've got too much going on. I have a hard time saying no. I can't keep up with my messages, my emails, but I keep taking on more. But the one thing I promised myself, this was my New Year's resolution for 24, was I'm going to surf and I'm going to play music again. So,
awesome.
But it's the exact opposite, not big, huge concerts with awesomeness like you're saying. It's just like, well, a guitar and a bass and a banjo or a piano. We're in different worlds as far as that stuff goes.
You're on the talent side, and I'm on the promotion side.
Yeah, well, it's been 20 years of me playing in the jungle by myself to a family that's tired of hearing about it. Now I've got all this in me. I want to get it out, but
nice.
So we're on different wavelengths. You can't help but get inside of something big and make it good, but you also never start that way. I've never seen you one time start saying, you know what? I'm going to meet the ministerio and I'm going to become the guy. Like you're not that person. You always start with, that sounds good. You think about what you want, but you're wildly fast and accurate with seeing an end vision. And then I think to get to the end vision, you have to deal with the chaos, and then you take that on.
You have to have patience. Anything you do in life, it doesn't matter if it's your family or business or what. And what I've learned is it's about solving problems. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You have to have patience with anything. You can't do something in an expectation to get it back in return. You have to do it just for the expectation that you did it.
Is that how you did your brewery? Because that doesn't sound good to an investment group, but it worked incredibly well. You guys became a model that still talked about today. It
was my brewery as an employee owner. I was brought in to New Belgium Brewing Company. People know us for Fat Tire. They started in 1991. I was brought in 10 years later in 2001 as a local brewer for other breweries on the Front Range of Colorado. And I was lucky enough to be a part of this amazing family and the amazing, the meteoric growth of a brewery that went from the state of Colorado to a national brand. While I was there, we went from 60,000 barrels to 1 million barrels before I left. And it taught me a lot about, it was the majority of my professional career. When I left there to come here, it was because I had my development and other interests that I was working on. And now I build and design breweries as kind of one of the side things that I do, and help other people manage their stuff. I audit breweries for them, tell them what they're doing right and wrong, just because of the history, and it keeps me fresh in what my career was. But coming here, it was like a jumping off point for me. It's like, what am I going to do next? And that's how I got involved. So I try to take the ethos of what I was trained and this wonderful opportunity that I had within the brewery, which is more than a brewery. It was setting a standard. It was one of the first open book management companies. It was one of the first private stock ownership companies. It was more than a brewery. It was a whole lifestyle. And I'll always pay homage to that opportunity that was provided to me, and being a part of that community. I always support that brand.
Well, the foundation of going inward to do the right thing, do the thing that you want.
That's why that brewery was so successful, right? Because they did it for the love of what they were doing, and it just turned into something bigger because of their passion. there's two things that are going to make any business successful. One is passion, and two is the story. If you don't have a good story, don't even start. People are emotional creatures. They want to latch themselves on and identify with things, brands, concepts, right? Be it politics, religion, doesn't matter. We all want to attach ourselves to things that we see as an idealistic thing. And making beer for me in a brewery that gave back to the community, was sustainable, setting standards for, wind energy and things that, I was proud to be a part of that. So those passions led to that success. And so whatever I do here, I feel like you don't have to do what everyone else is doing. You have to be passionate and believe in what you're doing.
Okay, on that note, first off, thanks for sharing all that. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Hopefully people hear this and benefit from it. And that also explains a lot of your weirdness here.
Sure.
It does.
Right.
That's just an observation and some admiration too. A lot of respect. But before I start talking too good about you, tell me about your next zany idea.
Oh boy, yeah. No.
I caught just a little bit of this earlier, and I stopped you because I wanted to get it on tape.
You wanted it fresh.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Just what are you doing now, man?
Okay. Yeah. So, kind of to go back to the evolution of me here and jumping off from my career, it's like, what do you do next? How are you going to fill your time? And I felt like it was important, whatever I'm trying to create, it's important that you're not doing it just for yourself. You're trying to do something that's going to help move and create positive change, right?
So if you need passion in a story, you're covering the passion part right now. So here's your passion.
Yeah, and so you put yourselves in these circles. When you're an entrepreneur, you're talking to other entrepreneurs, and all these ideas are bubbling up. And you just find yourself in certain situations, and you have to decide. Most of the decisions that you're making are no's, because 98% of all the things that bubble up, they may sound great in the moment, but sustainable, usually they're not.
Well, most people jump off at the nose too.
Right.
Right?
Right, exactly.
As soon as you find out it's hard, and those good ideas that you really thought was going to work, you find out that it takes an emotional toll on a lot of people, or they give up, or they just don't want to keep going. Again, that's the weirdness of you. You jump into the weirdest spot, you hang there, and then you actually get stronger through the spot where most people bounce.
The only way, nothing comes easily. If it comes easily, it does. Some things do come easily. I'll correct myself.
I say nothing's too strong a word on that one. Some things do, right?
Right.
Might not be worth it, or it might not fit.
But for me, the diamonds are in the rough.
Okay.
Like if you create a trend, it's going to be exponentially large than if you follow a trend. You're already on the back end of a trend. So success is always in the first 2% of any concept, okay? The first 2%.
What does that mean? I don't really understand that. Can you?
Most businesses and concepts that are successful, the pioneers of those things, people in the 1% always are generally going to lose, because there's an evolution to every concept, and a big part of that is educating the purpose and the need for that concept. And someone who's going to pioneer it, you hear about all these amazing people through history who are ahead of their time. Most of them were not successful. They had the vision and the idea, but they were never hailed as this visionary until the rest of the planet took the idea and made it big, right? So, but between the 1 and the 2%, those are the ones that get a foothold. And if it's a viable concept and you can get it through proof of concept, those are the people that are there soon enough to get a foothold that take over and control the industry in general, right? If you don't have the tenacity to stick through it, when you lose, you got to work harder, and you're going to lose and lose and lose. But if you stick with anything long enough, in my opinion, it'll become a winner and you will turn the tide.
So the passion parts, this makes sense. I get it.
You can lose. I mean, some people live their whole lives like Tesla, who had this insane mind and changed the planet. But look at how unsuccessful he was. He died a pauper,
right,
and was taking advantage of all of his ideas. He's a perfect visionary. So a lot of people that are trying to make change, they lose in the end. And if I lose, that's okay. I'm not going to lose. I'm not going to win most of the things that I'm doing, but at least I tried, and at least I tried to do something that I felt like was going to create positive change. And so when I was in a group with the music business, I had other people coming to me to fix problems for them. A lot of these opportunities, they all start with a problem, and everybody's trying to figure out the answer. How do we attack this problem or fix this problem? So certain types of people, that's what they thrive on, is how can we fix the problem? And being in the brewing industry and manufacturing, that's all I did was fix problems, right? Every day. That was how I thrive. So this one concept was presented to me as, with the plastic, single-use plastic waste problem that the planet is having, and everybody's attacking it from a different perspective. From mine, a friend of mine, his son was a football player at Harvard, and he got a bunch of concussions, and he was drinking water religiously out of bottles of water. And they found microplastics in his brain. And he's having all kinds of problems, and he's had to work through these psychological issues. But they were saying somehow the microplastics got in there, and they think it was affecting him in some way. So his father took on this mission and said, I want to create a more sustainable package. And he asked me to help solve this problem with him. Well, I got deeper down the road, and I realized, I said, yeah, this is something that we need, is single-use plastics are destroying the landfills. China has outlawed recycling because the recycling actually poisons the planet. When that happened, the industry moved to Southeast Asia. We literally, 95% of the plastic, they say 90, I think it's 95% of the world's plastic is going into landfills, oceans, streams, and the majority of that comes from these single-use applications. Plastic is a miracle, okay? It's a byproduct of another process that we use to produce fuel, and it comes from the oil industry, the distillate industry. But one of the byproducts is polyethylene and polypropylene. It is an incredible package. You can mold it into anything. It's lightweight, and it's actually got a lower carbon footprint than aluminum and glass and a lot of other materials out there. But the problem is it's end of life. So if you use a plastic and you use it for something that's reusable for a long period of time, it environmentally, it pays for itself. And I gave the example to some friends of cars. Cars used to be made of iron and steel, okay? The weight of those cars and the amount of fuel that it took and carbon emissions that were created to push those cars down the road was not sustainable until we started making plastic parts. We've saved billions of pounds of carbon emissions from those plastic parts. So plastic has a place. Medical industry, protecting and keeping things sanitary. It's an incredible material, but the petroleum-based plastics are creating more carbon emissions. The end of life is ruining the planet. We have microplastics going into fish. The problem with these petroleum-based plastics is when they break down, they don't break down into other substances. They break down into smaller parts of themselves. And it takes up to 1,000 years based on the resin for that to happen. So we're making a package that is too perfect, really. A barrier that is preserving what we want it to preserve, our food, but it's the end of life is ruining the planet, unfortunately. And recycling is not the answer, which is, they've been building that. The industry has been building this whole concept, and getting people. Remember when you were growing up as a kid, nobody wanted to recycle things, and we pushed and pushed and pushed until recycling became part of life for everybody. But the problem is the separation. It costs more to recycle that material than it does for virgin material. And
So you
it
just
also
get more and more that
poisons
stays
the
alive
planet.
forever, and then it poisons
The
the land.
emissions that come out of it from the way that they're recycling it, they're heating it, they're emitting all these chemicals into the atmosphere that are poisoning plants, poisoning people. That's why Asia outlawed it. That's why China said, no, we're no longer going to be the world's $15 billion recycling industry. Right?
So it sounds like you're lining up for a completely different angle on this tool that you're saying has a place in our lives. We've just been approaching it the wrong way.
We need to go to more sustainable materials that are reducing carbon emissions, that are not going to last 1,000 years, which it's going to be a paradigm shift for people to think, oh, there's a shelf life, but it's not the shelf life of the material inside the package. It's the shelf life of the package itself. We need the packages to break down like the food or whatever you're putting in it. Okay? Anything that's going to be a single-use application is going to be used on such a gigantic scale that we need to use bamboo and hemp and natural materials, oils, olive oil. There's so many things you can make films out of. So I started working on a project and studying materials that were manufacturable and scalable for single-use applications, and I came up with this resin through Total Energies. I worked with them, and we came up with a bottle that's produced 100% from sugar and plants. So we actually sequester. They produce the resin, not us. And there's other people that are producing bottles too, but we were the first bottle cap and label that was all industrially compostable. So I brought a sample so that you can see it. So this is actually what we're producing here. This is 100% made from sugar, non-GMO sugar cane. And a bottle, here's another one, so I'll tell you more about this bottle. So here's a blue version of it. But a bottle doesn't start out as a bottle. A bottle starts out as what looks like a little test tube and a cap. This is called a preform. The preform and the cap enclosure. So this preform then is made of a sugar compound, polylactic acid. And there's a bunch of different materials, new materials coming out on the planet. There's billions of dollars going into this industry trying to figure out and answer the problem. It's a big problem. But this is the only one that I see right now that's scalable. There's another one that I just found out yesterday that we're going to start working with that will change the planet, and it's going to become scalable very soon. So I'm really excited about that. But what this does, you produce the preform, okay? You produce this part and this part separately, the closure and the preform. We make a preform depending on what size the bottle. It'll be what size the preform is, the weight. So we'll take this sugar-based resin. We make a preform from it. We ship this anywhere in the world, and we can convert petroleum-based plastic manufacturing plants from using petroleum-based plastics to using the sugar-based, plant-based plastic that actually reduces the carbon footprint significantly on the planet.
So in production and in lifespan, on both ends of it.
It does have a shelf life, as it should, but it sequesters carbon. You're growing plants, so you're pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere, and it also takes lower heat to produce the resin. So both from a manufacturing standpoint and from the source, we're actually reducing the carbon footprint of the package. It's actually one of the lowest carbon footprints on the planet for any package. So now if I were to burn this material, then I'm going to release the carbon back into the atmosphere, okay? It's a give and a take, but this material is industrially compostable. And we've tested it, and we're working on some new certifications through Composters Manufacturing Alliance out of Seattle. And within, we did a 90-day test. Within 31 days, this had reduced less than 10% into carbon dioxide and water in the compost pile. So it turns into CO2, water, and lactic acid when it breaks back down. It's non-toxic. Lactic acid is in your muscles when you go anaerobic in a workout. So you can literally eat this. I would want to do it. It doesn't seem very appetizing.
So this could be our water bottles and
so the goal,
all kinds of stuff.
The goal is, at least for this application, it's a better application for juices and milks, things that have a shorter shelf life. But we went for the big holy grail of the bottle, the water bottle. And right now, because this looks so much like regular plastic and we don't want it in the recycling systems, our company will actually work with the endpoint users to create collection programs and collect 90% of it 90% of the time, find the proper end of life, be it a compost pile. You can burn it. It's actually great for cogeneration plants or producing electricity as an afterlife, because you burn it, it's non-toxic. We grind it up and add it as an additive to animal feed. So in places like Cuba and the islands and things like that, instead of going into a landfill, you can use it towards animal feed. We can actually reuse it as 3D printing filament at universities. We already have machines that'll reduce it down. So this is my big one. This is the big contribution to the planet for me.
Sounds that way. Holy crap, man.
Yeah.
This is a lot different than a non-profitable development in Oceanal. Like, this is...
But I haven't made any money on it yet, you know? Like, I'm taking a big risk, but it's something that you have to believe in, and you have to, like anything, you're solving problems, and you have to believe you can solve that problem. Or
you told me you have to have passion in a story.
Yeah.
And
right.
You also generally don't start it off the making money.
Yeah.
You're practicing what you preach right now.
You only live once.
We'll touch on that subject later. We'll see what your next product is.
So look at the cloudy bottle right there.
Mm-hmm.
This is a formulation I'm working with where we impregnate we take a starch, we reduce it into a sugar, the sugar. We do a fermentation process that produces lactic acid, or Total Energies does. They produce a pellet, they polymerize it into a pellet, into a plastic resin, but it's plant-based plastic resin, right? So then we have found another company that produces another starch, and we impregnate that starch into this one here. And this is our first prototype of an ocean biodegradable version of this. So we've already tested it at the university at UC Davis. We're 12.5% of 31% achievable in 90 days to get the ocean biodegradable certification.
You're gonna have to just come back, man. We have so many subjects. You're gonna have to come back and stay tuned to this. Like holy crap.
There you go,
Mike. You're a maniac.
I'm an idiot.
Well, let's call you a beautiful idiot. How about that?
Sure.
Because what you're doing is just a fine example, man. You're just gonna have to come back. There's also other stuff we didn't even get a chance to talk to. You're a very unique person, and I'm glad to know you and call you.
Yeah, good to see you, man.
We're gonna have you back on.
All right.
All right.